Cath shook her head. She just needed to settle her nerves, to take the anxiety she felt like black static behind her eyes and an extra heart in her throat and shove it all back down to her stomach where it belonged, where she could at least tie it into a nice knot and work around it. Her dad and Wren would be up any minute, and Cath didn't want them to know she was about to melt down. If Cath melted down, her dad would melt down. And if either of them melted down, Wren would act like they were doing it on purpose just to ruin her perfect first day on campus, her beautiful new adventure. That's a quote from FanGirl by Rainbow Rowell. This is YA Book Chat, and I'm your host, Leah Stuhler.
Hi, I'm Michael.
I'm Barbara.
And I'm Lauren.
We are the hosts of Badass Literature Society, a book review podcast where we take book recommendations from listeners like you, read them, and then discuss them on our show.
Join us once a month as we dive into the books you picked and talk about them.
And don't miss our bonus episodes covering all sorts of random bookish topics that come out in between reviews.
Don't worry, if you want to read one of the books, the first part of each episode is designated spoiler-free, so you can listen and see if you'd like to read it, and then come back and listen to the rest later.
You can find Badass Literature Society on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, and anywhere else you like to listen.
Now, back to the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of YA Book Chat. Today, I am excited to bring to you the book FanGirl by Rainbow Rowell. This book just really did it for me in so many ways. It was a lot of fun to read this book for so many different reasons, and I really enjoyed it. So today's episode is going to be a lot of fun. And I am very excited to welcome back to the podcast my friend Victoria Koops. She has not been here in a while, so I am very excited to get to have her back. Hey, Victoria, how's it going?
Hey, Leah, it's so exciting to be back with you on YA Book Chat. And I'm so thrilled to be talking about one of my absolute favorite books, FanGirl. This is going to be a really fun episode, I think.
I think so too. And you guys, Victoria is the one who recommended FanGirl to me and said, you have to read this book. So here we are. And it's really good. I'm so glad that you recommended it because as soon as I started reading it, I just fell in love with it right away. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I'm super glad that you liked it as much as you did, because when you recommend a book, it's always kind of like a nervous experience, right? Because you love it and sometimes other people don't. And this is one of like my absolute favorite YA books. It's kind of like, I don't know, chef's kiss, like the epitome of YA in my opinion. So I was really nervous that you wouldn't like it.
Well, you and I have very much the same likes in YA books, it seems like. So, because even when we did Scythe together, we both really liked the first book. We're okay with the second book, and then both had the same issues with book number 3. So I figured if you were recommending this book to me, it was going to be a good choice.
Oh, thanks.
Well, because it has been a little while since you've been on, why don't you tell everybody, in case somebody's just listening for the first time, a little about who you are and your writing and what you do.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria Koops, and I am a YA novelist myself. I'm what would be called an emerging author in the literary world. I'm unpublished currently, but I'm working on becoming published and have been sending out query letters to agents and hoping to get a response for representation for my first manuscript, which is completed. And I'm very excited to someday join Leah on the podcast to discuss my books in the future. I live in Canada, so I have what I've been told is a Canadian accent, which is really funny because we don't feel that way up here.
Of course.
Yeah, it's so funny when people tell me I have a Canadian accent. I'm like, what accent? Like, it's not as distinct. Yeah, like I don't know. I could say about and out. That's and it. Sometimes it comes out, but anyway, so I'm from Canada, that's where I live. And I met Leah online and we've had some really good times talking about our favorite YA books, and I'm just really happy to be back on the podcast again.
Yay. I'm so glad you're here. It's been too long. So This is really good. So just as a reminder for everybody, or in case this is your first time listening, welcome. But also, we will do the first about 15 minutes spoiler free, so that just in case you have not yet read FanGirl, you can get an idea of what it's like and what we kind of liked about it, and not have anything spoiled for you. And then when we are ready to dive in deeper, I will give you a warning before we head into spoilers. So we are going to get started, and I'm just going to give you guys kind of a brief plot overview. So FanGirl is about a girl named Cath, but she likes to be called Cath for short, and I don't blame her. She loves reading and writing, and her passion is writing fan fiction for her favorite book series, which is called Simon Snow. Cath and her twin sister, Wren, are starting college, but Wren doesn't want to be roommates with Cath. She wants to kind of start her own new adventure by herself instead of just being constant twin besties. And so she starts to kind of pull away from Cath a little bit. So Cath is now on her own, and she is very much out of her comfort zone. She ends up with a very snarky roommate who happens to have a very cute boyfriend who always is hanging around. But she also has a professor who dislikes fan fiction, a classmate who just wants to talk about writing, and she can't stop worrying about her dad, who she has left behind when she left for college. So the big question is, can Cath do it? Can she survive her freshman year of college without Wren and get through? So that is the gist of our book without me giving much of anything else away. I will say it. Okay. So our main character's name is Cather, Cather. Her sister's name is Wren, Wren. I never caught on to the fact until it was actually brought up in the book that their name equals one name of Catherine. Like I was like, oh, at that point in the book. And I went like, that's so stupid. I totally should have caught that. Anyways, very good, Rainbow Rowell. Funny trick. I just didn't catch it right.
That was a good that was a good revelation when Leah like messaged me sometime in the afternoon and was like, it's Catherine. But you know what? I don't blame you. I think that it's like because Wren is spelt W-R-E-N, like the bird, you don't really put it together until it's like in your face. So it was just funny.
It was funny. As I started reading this, I was constantly sending Victoria messages and like taking pictures of quotes and sending them to her. And it was hilarious. We had a good old chat as I was reading through this. So
that's actually Leah's process, is that she just outlines her entire show by sending her guest quotes of the things that she liked. So that's how like a little peek behind the scenes at YA Book Chat. That's 100% how it's done every single time.
Pretty much. Yeah. Pretty much.
I'm kidding.
No. It's not. Only for certain people. Only some
just
guests.
The cool ones.
Yeah. It depends on the book too, So, no. All right. Well, let's get started. So again, we are going to talk spoiler free for a little bit. So why don't you tell everybody some of your like overall thoughts and what you like about the book and all that good stuff?
Yeah. So, okay. The thing that I'm going to probably spend a lot of time talking about this episode, and is a little bit of a peek into my writing process, is that this is one of the books that I've studied as a writer to kind of develop my own craft. So when I said that it was kind of the like what I think is the epitome of good YA. This is like very on brand for me. And it's what I want to become as a writer. I would love to produce a novel at this kind of level. And I really respect Rainbow Rowell as an author and as someone in the craft as well. So like, it's just, I love FanGirl. I also love her other book, Rainbow Rowell's other book, Eleanor and Park. Those two books kind of came out when I just started getting serious about writing, and I really ripped both of them apart to learn what my voice was. And so I deal with like really similar themes. Like I write contemporary fiction, contemporary YA fiction, but I always have like a nerdy element to it. So like FanGirl, I mean, it's called FanGirl, but it's
right.
dealing with fan fiction. And so like I do that too in my own books. And so my finished manuscript is about Dungeons and Dragons. And yes, exactly.
That's
so
fun.
like I definitely like draw a lot of inspiration, I think, from this book, from Rainbow Rowell as an author. And that's one of the reasons that I love FanGirl. The other thing I really love about this novel is that it's like, it is quintessential YA, but it's set a little bit like after YA, like, because lots of YA is set in high school. And so this is taking place of like freshman year of college, university. And that's a very like that's a really big moment in time for someone who's learning who they are and what they're about. And that's all YA is. It's a bildungsroman over and over and over again, right? Where you're just on the journey to find out who you are. And so I love that this one is a little bit like after, like it's taken Cath that long to figure out who she is. And it's like before new adult was a thing, because that's an emerging subgenre. And so this was like a YA book that was doing that a long time before new adult became kind of a term in publishing. So yeah, those are like the two main reasons like that I overall love this book, besides all the awesome things we're going to talk about when we get into the spoilers.
It is fabulous. I really like it too, because like she has such great quotes in it too. Like one of my favorite ones was right at the beginning when I first started reading it, because she said, this is the first quote that I sent you. It says, she just needed to settle her nerves, to take the anxiety she felt like black static behind her eyes and an extra heart in her throat and shove it all back down to her stomach where it belonged, where she could at least tie it into a nice knot and work around it. I love that kind of writing that really paints such a vivid picture like that, like black static behind her eyes and an extra heart in her throat and then shoving it all back down. Like it's just very descriptive. And I love that kind of writing with all the pictures that she paints. So that was one thing that really drew me into. And the other thing is that, I mean, as soon as I started, I was like, it's her freshman year of college, which I really enjoyed, but it was also fun because I had so many flashbacks to my freshman year of college and like just all the things that you experience, and like totally figuring out who you are and what's going on and who your friends are going to be. Can you be friends with this person or that person? Or, you're getting to know people. Okay. This is not as, I don't feel like this is a spoiler. You tell me if you think it is, but it doesn't really give any information away. So, Cath and her roommate sit in the cafeteria when they eat lunch and dinner and totally like talk about the people who they see around them, like walking through the dining hall. And it like becomes a thing for them. And I remember doing that too. Like, with whoever with my friends, and we'd sit and eat and be like, hey, look at that person. Do you think, whatever, or are they dating that person? I don't know. Maybe I saw her around campus before. Like, oh, look, she's wearing that crazy hat again or whatever, like all these things. And so it was so weird. Like, it was so funny to read all of this. It was like reliving part of my own college experience. And which I loved college. Like that was like, I hated middle school and high school, like hated. But then when I got to college, it was like the most amazing experience for me. And I loved it. So this was great because being able to relive all of that, even like the bad stuff that happened to, it was still like, you put it all in perspective, and it's learning experiences. And Cath has a lot of those as well. So that was one of the things that I really loved, just being in that world and being able to enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that's going to continue to be a trend in young adult and new adult fiction because, like, the statistics actually show that a lot of people are growing up with YA, like, because
Mhm.
those of us who started reading YA in like high school and middle school are now adults, but still
Mhm.
love the YA genre. And so there's a shift in the audience for YA. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there continue to be those like college stories because
Yeah.
it does transport you back in time. It's very evocative. It's really like a lot of cool, crazy things are happening in those years. And so I think this book was maybe a little bit ahead of its time, but I wouldn't be surprised if the trend continues to be there are more kind of YA new adult stories set in those university college years. Yeah.
I agree. I think, and it's a good, especially freshman year, like that's a really good age because you're still a teenager, usually your freshman year, like 18, 19. So, and there is, and like Cath, she has to figure out who she is really because her sister's like, I don't want to be with you anymore. So, she's been a twin her whole life. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have to learn to actually be my own person. Like, what is that like? But whether you're a twin or not, when you go to college, especially if you're going away from home and like you're living on campus, that's what you're doing. You are figuring out who you are because it's your first time really all by yourself, living independently, making your own choices about every single thing that you do. Like nobody's there to say, I don't think you should hang out with that person. They're a bad influence on you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're like, I'm just going to hang out with whoever I want. And you got to figure it out on your own, So, yeah. It's great. It's
my youngest sister is just 18 now and has graduated from high school. And so she is going off to college in the fall and she has been accepted to college, or we say university here in, British Canada. So she's going off to university in Vancouver, Victoria, BC, like British Columbia, way on the West Coast. And like my family lives in the middle of Canada and Saskatchewan. And so we're like, oh, really? Like she's like going for college, she's leaving for university. And so, when you're talking about like, if you leave your home city or where your people are, where your family are, like leaving for college or university is a really big deal. And like Cath and Wren are leaving like I think what was it, like a 4 or 5 hour drive? Like it's like,
it wasn't too far.
It's not like they're going to a different state, but like it still is intimidating. And you're right. There's no one that from before or whatever. Like it's just, it's a very transformative, I think, year, that freshman year of post-secondary, right? So it's a really fun time to write about.
It is. And so it's along the same lines, but also something else that I enjoyed about the book was that the references that Rainbow Rowell put into the book, like she talks about 90210 and which I grew up watching, and she talks about the Lord of the Rings, and there's a reference to a Spencer's gift shop store, which I don't know if you guys, some of you won't know what Spencer's is because it's not even around anymore. And it's an American thing. Although Victoria did know what it was when I messaged her. But so like she has all these funny references. And so one of the references takes place in this absolutely brilliant quote that Cath's dad says. Like he's like, and it's about, your freshman year of college and being able to experience everything. So he says, honey, I've watched a lot of 90210. The parents weren't even on the show once Brandon and Brenda went to college. This is your time. You're supposed to be going to frat parties and getting back together with boys. So like, I was like, yeah. So like her dad gets it. Her dad's even like, hey, you're supposed to be doing this stuff. Go do this, have fun. I just love that. It was a 90210 reference in that point too. I was like, oh my gosh, stop it. It's perfect.
Rainbow Rowell as an author, she gets it. Like she gets it. So I'm not even surprised. And she's very evocative, right? Like, so from the language she uses to the allusions, like to 90210 or Spencer's. Spencer's. Okay. Okay. The reason I know what Spencer's is because I read a web comic where it's called Spenders. So
Gotcha.
I'm like, that's the only reason I know what it is. But like Rainbow Rowell is very evocative, and she chooses those things because it points to kind of setting the scene, setting the timeline of this when it was taking place, which I mean is a bit dated maybe now, but like for those of us who are kind of growing up with YA and still reading it into our 30s and 40s, some of us, right? Like that's still topical. Those are things that we still want to read about. So I think that's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, I was totally super excited as soon as I read that 90210 reference. I was like, oh, yes, because I'm about to be in 3 weeks. I'm about to be 41. And so
get out. No,
I am. I know it's hard to believe, but
oh my goodness.
I am. And so this is why my husband like mercilessly laughs at me when he's like, you're reading books made for teenagers. I'm like, I know, but they're good. So leave me alone. So anyway, but yeah, so I'm turning 41 in a couple of weeks. And like, this is why, like I said, I grew up watching 90210. So it was like a perfect reference for me. And I mean, The Hobbit and the Fellowship of the Rings are just like timeless anyway, but that, like I first read those when I was in middle school, so that will always be there for me. And so, yeah, she just has these really fun references and they're just, they make sense. Even if they don't make sense to a teenager reading the book, they do make sense to me.
Well, and lots of it's transcendent too, right? Like I think one of the things that makes YA so accessible is that a lot of the themes are like they span age gaps, right? So they're entertaining, enjoyable narratives about a critical time in our development, adolescence. And so I think that's why people love them still after they age out or whatever that means of the demographic. Like I'm like, that changes. Like love what you love. And that's totally awesome. I'm going to write YA until I'm like 90.
Awesome. That works. My husband just likes to tease me. What was funny was, okay, side note. And then I promised you guys, we'll get back to the book. But see, some of you might be able to relate to this. Maybe you can relate to this, Victoria. I don't know what your husband is like, but so he teases me about reading, books written for teenagers, but we watched on Netflix. Now I'm going to forget the name of it. Of course I am. Okay. It's a TV show. It's a Netflix TV show, and it's all about teenagers anyway, who live in island in North Carolina. And there's like the rich people and the not rich people.
Yeah. My cousins made me watch that because they're teenagers and they're cool. And they were like, you need to watch this.
It's going to come back. The name of it's going to come to me after we finish recording. That's probably. Anyway, so we watched this, The Outer Banks. There it is.
Good job coming in at the clutch.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So we watched The Outer Banks, right? He loved it. And I looked at him one night and I was like, this is intended for teenagers, right? He's like, what are you talking about? I was like, this show is totally like a teen show. It's geared toward. He was like, shut up. I said, you can't tease me anymore about the books I read because you're enjoying the show. Anyway.
You should get him watching Riverdale next. Be like, okay, next on your your teenage
Here's
Netflix
what comes
binge.
Next. Yes.
My husband made me watch Mortal Kombat, like the new one, like last night or the night before. And I just was like, oh man, it's so cheesy. Like it's so cheesy. And I kept saying that like throughout the whole thing. And finally he paused it and he turned to me and he said, you know what? I don't call your YA books cheesy. I was like, oh, okay. Sorry. Continue watching. Enjoy your bliss.
Oh man. It's funny how we do that, but yeah. Oh, anyway, but this book had a lot of stuff in it that I really liked. I liked it's because it's not like a super complicated storyline, but it's great in its simplicity. Like, and I don't say that to be negative about it because I loved it. It just, it follows Cath and her freshman year and all that she goes through and the ups and downs. It's so relatable. It's so very relatable with the things that she experiences, which we'll talk more about in depth soon. And okay, here's the other, I also really enjoy that it is kind of like a book within a book because of the way that she structured this, because we've got like all the scenes from the Simon Snow books, which by the way are fake. She made them up. Just in case anybody needed that. But you've got the Simon Snow books, which she gives us like passages from, but then you have, Rainbow Rowell's actual book, but then we also get chunks of passages from Cath's fan fiction that she's writing. So it's really
Carry on.
Thank you. It was right there. But so it's fun because it's like a book within a book within a book almost. And what I really enjoyed too is, okay, I've never actually like read any fan fiction. So I know, I see that look on your face. I
can't believe it. Like, I honestly can't believe that you haven't read any fan fiction.
I know. It's weird. Like, as I was reading this book, I was like, how have I never read any fan fiction on everything else? Like, and it was funny because I was even like, I remember watching, or Victoria Avier had posted something on Instagram one night and she was watching something on TV and she was posting about it. And then people had commented and then she was like, I wrote fan fiction about this. Like, and I was like, wow, she's written fan fiction. Like, I've never even read any of this stuff. So I was like, I need to read more of it. So I liked getting that whole fan fiction side of it too, because while I know it's a thing, I've never really read it. I've never really delved into that world much. So that was really cool being pushed into that in this book. I really liked it.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about fan fiction, because I have some really strong opinions about it. So when we get to that part where we're like talking about the other strong opinions about fan fiction in this book, I am looking forward to it because I got things to say, Leah.
Oh, I'm sure. I don't even I've never even read it. And yet when that part of the book happened, I was like, yeah, I have thoughts on this too. And I've never even written it. So this was, her whole book within a book thing too. So in case you haven't read the book, and this is not really a spoiler. Cath really loves this book series called about Simon Snow. And so within this story, Rainbow Rowell has Simon Snow, like this whole series, and she has the author of the Simon Snow books, and she puts, passages from the Simon Snow books in there. So like, it makes you think that the Simon Snow books and this author were real, but they're not. Rainbow Rowell made them up, which reminded me, because that's what William Goldman did when he wrote The Princess Bride. He made up S. Morgenstern. The man does not exist. He made up, he said that S. Morgenstern wrote The Princess Bride and that his version was like the version his dad would tell him because his dad would take out the boring stuff. But come to find, it's not. William Goldman made up but that is a lie. So she did. So it kind of reminded me of that. Fortunately, because I had this whole experience with The Princess Bride where I thought that because when it came out, I was like 9. And so I thought that it was really written by S. Morgenstern. And I would go to the library and look through the card catalog. Oh my gosh, I really am old. The card catalog. All these teenagers listening right now are like, what the heck is a card catalog? Go Google it and you'll see what I had to do at the library when I was growing up. Anyway, so I would go to the library and desperately look for The Princess Bride and look under S. Morgenstern because you had to look up by author's last name. You couldn't look it up by and I could never find it and I couldn't figure it out. And I'm telling you, it was not until I was a grown adult that I found out that was just made up. And so fortunately, going into this book, I had that experience. And I already knew. So I was like, okay, I see what you did there, Rainbow Rowell. I'm onto this game. Anyway, so, but it was still, it just made it a lot of fun. My whole point here is it's just fun, like the book within the book and all of that together. So yeah.
It is super fun. And since this book has been published, Rainbow Rowell has like published not a sequel necessarily, but like she's published Carry On, which is the fan fiction that Cath writes in FanGirl. So it's kind of fun. I read, I don't know if it was an interview way back in the day, but I read like maybe frequently asked questions on Rainbow Rowell's website or something. And one of them was, are you ever going to write a sequel for Eleanor and Park, which is her other book that I also really love? And she said in her response, no, but if I am going to write a sequel, it'll be like about FanGirl. And I think she was alluding to Carry On because that came out like a few years later. And now I think there's lots of like she's doing a lot of cool stuff. Rainbow Rowell is about like the Carry On, and then Simon Snow. Like I think they have graphic novels for like the Simon Snow books instead of actual novels now. And like, there's like some really cool kind of spin-off stuff that's happening. And I think that's really neat. Like it's very creative. So that's kind of cool too about all her world building.
Definitely. I love that she did that. All right. I think it's time to head into spoilers. I'm ready. So I think you are too.
This is my favorite part. I
Me
love
too.
it when Leah announces that we can talk
Yes.
with spoilers.
All right. So if you are listening and you have not read FanGirl by Rainbow Rowell and do not want anything spoiled for you, then please stop listening here. Go read this fantastic book and come back and listen to the rest of the episode after you have read it. But of course, if you have read FanGirl, or if you really just don't care about spoilers, then by all means, please continue listening to the rest of this. All right. That was your warning. Here we go. Okay. So Cath and Wren, I'm looking at it in my notes and like, how did I not see that? But it's because I didn't have it written out in front of me. They're two names together, Catherine. So, okay. So everybody, so here's the funny thing. So I love that like how sometimes parents, like when you're naming kids, you just don't know, like you think you're going to plan it out and pick the names ahead of time. And then they were only prepared for one baby. And then, oh, look, it's two. What do? We only have the name Catherine picked out. Oh, well, we'll just split it into two names, Cather and Wren. What? But why Cather? That makes me think like catheter, which is really not pleasant. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be reminiscent of catheter, but it is annoying. Like I feel like Cath got like the bad end of that deal. I'm like, I would totally not like my name if it was Cath. Wren is a pretty name. Like Wren by itself is pretty. And I think like, I wonder if that was very intentional because Wren is like the pretty popular sister, even though they're identical twins. And Cath is kind of awkward. She's anxious. So I wonder if it was like kind of meant to indicate like a little bit about their personality, but no, I totally get the changing names at last minute because man, that's just you don't know what you're going to name your child until they're in front of you, and then you go in a totally different direction and end up with a 90-year-old woman's grandmother's name for your baby. So it happens.
But it's cute and it fits her.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, no, that's I like it.
It's okay because, my husband and I had a name picked out for our youngest, and okay, he's asleep, so he won't hear me. We had a name picked out for our youngest. It's a great name. And then we were watching one of our favorite TV shows one night, and my husband was like, "Hey, you want to name him Raylan?" Which is the name of the lead character in the show. And I was like, yeah, all right. And then, so we named him after a TV character. And then this gets even better. Then we were trying to figure out middle names, right? Because we wanted him to have an Irish middle name. So we're watching a different TV show another night. And the guy in their apartment has a bottle of Jameson Irish whiskey in the background. My husband goes, "Hey, how about Jameson?" And I was like, okay, fine, but we have to spell it the other way so that people don't think we named him after a whiskey. So, you know, could be
so
that.
funny.
It could be worse, Victoria.
My husband and I had a name picked out for like, I kid you not, 6 years. Like, it was like we had this name. It was the only little girl name that we liked. Like we picked out a ton of boys' names. Like we had boys' names up and down the wall, and like we only had one girl name that we liked. And then my husband and I adopted. So we met our baby and looked at her, and I was like, "Oh, we can't use that name. Like that's not her name. We need to figure out a different name." So it was like, it was just. It happens. And so I do appreciate that that's what happens in the book. I think it's really cute, but Cath got the bad side of
She totally did. But what's funny is that Levi calls her Cather a lot. She's always like, Cath. Like, well, at the beginning she corrects him, but then later on in the book she doesn't say anything. But it's funny because like it sounds endearing when he says it. Levi makes it sound so wonderful. Like I would read it and hear it come out of his mouth, and I was like, "Oh yeah, it sounds nice when you say it." I mean, so everything coming out of that boy's mouth was like, "Ooh." Well, not everything. There was that one thing he did with his mouth that wasn't so pleasant when he kissed the other girl. But whatever, we'll talk about that later. Anyway, so Cath, so he was my other like fun. The Lord of the Fellowship of the Rings reference was perfect because, you know, Cath's mom left them when they were little. Like she just left. She walked out. She left them and their dad. And, but all of a sudden, you know, now she wants back in the picture, and she started talking, and Wren is talking to her, and Cath is like, there's no way on earth I'm ever going to talk to her. Cath is talking to her dad, and he says, have you seen her? And she says, no, or she asked if he'd seen him, and he says no. And she says, it says, Cath shuddered and her dad squeezed her tight. When I think about her coming here, she said, it's like that scene in the Fellowship of the Ring when the hobbits are hiding from the Nazgul. He's like, your mother's not evil, Cath. And she's like, well, that's how I feel. But I that's like, that is a really good description. But I mean, you know, not just the reference, but it kind of is too. Like you think about it, your mother leaves you. When you're little, like 6, you never know her. And all of a sudden she's like, oh, I want to get back in the picture. Yeah. I would want to run and hide from her. Like she's a Nazgul for sure, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like, I'm going to just keep saying like, and that's another thing I love about this book. And that's another thing I love about this book, because I really just love so many things about this book. That's how it works. But I think it's really cool that Cath is anxious, and that's such a, like part of who she is. That's part of her personality. It's part of her identity. And so right from the beginning, with her sister deciding that she wants to be in a different dorm, in a different room, not be roommates, and Cath having to kind of be forced to do something that she's really uncomfortable doing, like anxiety is a central theme throughout the rest of the book, because it's really Cath developing coping strategies for her anxiety. And so I don't really advertise this in my writing world, but I'm actually a social worker. That's my background. That's what I'm trained in. And so I work with adolescents. I'm a school counselor, and we do a lot of anxiety stuff, right? And so like years before anxiety was kind of like the buzzword it is now, especially in like school systems or in literature, Rainbow Rowell was telling a story about anxiety, and her main character has anxiety, and the whole story is about Cath figuring out like how to cope with that. And now like agents and publishers are asking for more of those stories. So like I love that Cath is that, like that's one of her struggles, because we all have anxiety. We all have to work through our anxiety and find strategies that work for us to manage it. And so, like Cath is just, I think, a really strong character because of some of those perceived weaknesses that she perceives in herself too. So, and that's like right at the beginning of the story. And it's, of course, it's wrapped up in her relationship with her mother, and it's wrapped up in her father's own mental health. You get kind of that's a journey that Cath goes on. And like, so it's just, some of that is really cool that it was in this book. And I don't know when this book was published. I can't remember. It was like 2007 or
I'm
something.
not sure either.
Yeah, but
I agree because she does go through a lot too with her dad. Like her dad has a lot of like mental health issues that he struggles with and trying to figure things out. And, so she's also worried about him. And then Wren is that person who is like goes to college and wants to try everything and party really hard, and she ends up in the hospital because she drinks too much, and so then there's that, and her and Wren don't talk to each other for a few months at one point, so there is a lot of like struggle and anxiety and depression and different things to deal with, and it is, again, like you said, it's something we all deal with at one point. And these are all really like realistic things, like I grew up with a dad who suffered with depression, and it was not fun being in my household, and there was that, and I struggled with anxiety, and I had friends who, when I was in college, most definitely drank entirely too much, who I was worried about that they were going to die because they drank too much. And, would get sick and all this stuff. And, so, I mean, it's so that I agree. I mean, I love it for that, because we do need to bring this up. Like, people need to know that this is realistic. This is what happens. And it's okay. We all struggle like this, and we all go through things, and we need to figure out the coping strategies and figure out how we're going to get through it and handle it.
Yeah. Well, and like I think thematically this book is dealing with like trauma and like the broken relationship with the mom. It's dealing with like single parent families, dealing with coping strategies, positive and negative, right? Like I'd argue that Wren's alcoholism adjacent, like that is her coping strategy, right? Like she goes to college and wants to try everything, and that's kind of her personality, but then she gets like sucked into it and it becomes dangerous, and that's kind of how she's coping with the transition, the change, right? And so like Cath is like an excellent central focus in all of that, I guess. I'm pretty sure the dad like is written to have bipolar, which is like, I think, really well done.
Yeah,
in this book, because he goes through manic depressive episodes, and like they're lengthy. That's kind of a misconcept about bipolar, is that it's like people think it's like a snap change, like that you're happy one minute and then you're sad the next minute. And it's like, no, that's not a thing. It's like episodes that last weeks and months, sometimes years. And it's pretty volatile. And so like we see the dad ride that wave, and like, I think all of that in a YA book at the time that this was published is pretty impressive, because we're just starting to like now realize that we need more of that in our entertainment, in our media. Right. So, like that's one of the reasons I think Rainbow Rowell is just like she's a fantastic author. She was doing that way before it was trendy.
Yeah, right. She was a step ahead of her time. It's fantastic. I agree. Now, don't worry, friends. This is not just going to all be a total serious conversation.
No, that was probably the extent of the serious.
Yeah, that was about it. But we need it. We needed it. But I think we should kind of head into some like fun, like Levi territory here.
Yeah, and let's talk about Levi.
We need to talk about Nick too on the other side of that, but let's get the bad one out of the way first. So, okay, Nick. Okay. Now here's the thing though about Nick. Like, he ends up being a total jerk, right? But like we've all had this experience as girls, as women, like young women, like especially in college. You don't know. Sometimes you don't know what a guy is thinking. And you're like, is he flirting with me? At this age, like I remember totally having this type of similar experience where I'd be hanging out with a guy and we'd be studying or whatever, or just hanging out with other friends. And I'm like, is he flirting with me? Does he like me? Or is this just like a working, like classmates relationship? Like you don't know what's going on. And she And that's all it was for Cath. She was confused. She didn't know if she had feelings for him. Turns out Nick was a total jerk, which she figured out. But we've all had that experience, been there, so you kind of have to go through that to get on the other side.
He's like the when you're 14 years old, imagining what university or college is going to be like, he's what you conjure as like the ideal boyfriend. Like Nick is like who you want to fall in love with before you get to the age of being there and living it and realizing he's actually not that great of a guy, because he's kind of swoony. Like he's like described as like handsome, classically handsome, and he's a English guy, so he likes or like in like English major, so he likes writing, and he's very creative, and he wears scarves and works at the library. The works at the library is the one that gets me, because I worked at the library, so I'm like, no, don't make that part of who he is. But like, it's part of his appeal that he's like, he's literary, and Cath is drawn to that because she's also a literary person. So like, I didn't date anyone like Nick, but I like wanted to date people like Nick.
Same here. I had that same experience. Yeah. But so what got me was like when he comes to her towards the end and he wants to publish the story that she helped him write. And I was like, you really think she's going to let you do that? You're out of your mind, dummy. And then I'm like, I can't believe you have the balls to ask her that after you claim the story as totally your own. But what I loved was that their professor totally figured it out, and she knew, like, because she knew Cath's writing style also, and she knew his writing style. And so she could see Cath's personality and Cath's writing within his piece. Well, what he turned in is his own piece, so I loved that the professor was able to recognize that and call that out. And to tell Cath, I see that you did this too. But I was just like, what a jerk that he first did that. And it's like, I'm going to just use this as my final project. Sorry, like, too bad, so sad, not even really asking her. And then he comes to her like sheepishly wanting to publish it. And I was like, good luck with that. I love that scene though, because I love how protective, Levi is of her when they're in the hallway and Nick is there. It was hilarious. It's like, you go, Levi.
I love Levi. I'm very excited to talk about Levi. I think that Nick, like, he, like what you were saying, the reason that he's so like he's so damaging as a person, or harmful as a person, is because he totally exploits her. Like he 110% uses Cath for her writing talent, her writing skill, and like plagiarizes her work. And plagiarism is a whole theme in this thing. And so like, it's interesting that he plagiarizes her work, and then that we have kind of the parallel with Cath writing fan fiction too, right? And lots of people claiming that's plagiarism. And so, what bothered me so much about Nick was that he was like exploitive and like knew that's what he was doing. Like, I'm not convinced that he was like not doing that from the beginning.
He totally was. Right? He totally was. He was doing it all on purpose and taking advantage of her. I feel like once he realized that she was a good writer, it was like, I'm going to use this to my advantage and, use my charms and try and get her in my snare. Thankfully, though, she figured it out and Levi came along.
Oh, we love Levi. We're going to talk about Levi. We're just actually going to gush about Levi for the rest of this now.
Pretty much. Yeah. That's just about how it's going to go. He's just, but as soon as I got to a point, and I remember texting you, and I got to a point and I was like, she's totally going to end up with Levi, isn't she? And of course, Victoria wouldn't tell me, which is fine. I didn't want it to be ruined, but I was just like, I knew it. She's going to end up with him. Like, I wanted her to. It got to this point and I was like, okay, now she has to be with him, because if she doesn't, I'm going to cry at the end of this book. But he's just so, and I kept on thinking, even before Cath really thought about it, I was like, maybe he's not Reagan's boyfriend. Maybe they're just really good friends. Maybe they used to date, but now they're not anymore. And they're just like best friends. Like that happens. So and then of course we find out that that was the case. And he's got this huge thing for Cath, which is why he's there all the time. But he's just like, he's an idiot sometimes, but he's also like just so super sweet and he's playful with her. And I'm like, I also like, how come she didn't realize this sooner? I mean, she had her stupid boyfriend back home who then broke up with her. But even still, I was like, he's in your room all the time. But like when Reagan's not there, like that's a clue, like she just doesn't pick up on it for a while. So it's funny.
They're both like, they're well matched that way though, because I think like they both were pretty ignorant about like the other person reciprocating their feelings, because Levi's kind of like, he's a little bit of a ditz.
Oh my gosh. I know.
I just love the two of them together. It's so great. And I actually really love how it's set up, like how, because I read this book like years ago and then recommended it. So Leah was reading this story for the first time, which was super fun for me because I got to kind of like relive it through Leah and like you asking questions about Levi, like being, is he going to be the one that she ends up with? Like, how is this going to happen? Because it is totally set up for you to interpret like a few different ways. Reagan is Cath's roommate, and I love Reagan. Like,
me too. Oh my gosh, I
love Reagan her so much.
She's fantastic.
Like, she's so cool. She's like every older cool girl that I wanted to be when I was like at this age.
Yes, totally. Oh my gosh.
And she kind of doesn't care about it, what anyone thinks. And she's just like so authentically herself. I like that she's like, I don't think it says that she's plus size, but like, she's like a bigger girl. And like, she just owns it. Like, I just love her character. And so her and Levi did used to date. And that was like, that's kind of the relationship that they have, is that friends, like, on again, off again, kind of like, we were so close. And now that we've decided to be friends, we still have that closeness, but we're only friends now. And so it's really easy to misinterpret that. Right.
Yeah.
So I like that Levi is like around, and it could be perceived that he's just trying to like, maybe get back together with Reagan, or maybe they're just super best friends now. Like, it's like, you can kind of look at it a few different ways. And I totally get Cath's insecurity about all of that, because that's a really hard place to be.
It is. It totally is. Well, because then later, after Levi kisses her that first time and she's all excited, and then she has the chat that she has with Reagan, like after her and Levi start like dating, because he kisses her and then she's all excited and doesn't know. And then she goes to the party and he's kissing another girl because he's an idiot. And then they get together and then they have the conversation. Reagan sets up the rules. And I was like, this is the best conversation ever, because it's just hilarious, because in a situation like that, you do need to kind of have rules like that. I don't want you to talk to me about your sexual relationship. I don't want you to be all lovey-dovey in front of me. Nobody talks to me about your issues, and you can't be jealous, which is the big one. So I can kind of relate to Reagan on this, because, so when I was in college, I had a Levi, kind of. We became like best friends first. We were really close. And then we were kind of on again, off again with like dating. We had a complicated relationship, but he was even though we weren't like together all the time, we were still like best friends. And like Reagan and Levi after they're done dating. So one of my roommates, one day, I knew something was going on because I was living with two girls, and I knew something was going on because they were both acting a little funky. And then one of them came in and was like, I have to tell you something. And I was like, just had this like pit of dread in my stomach, because I didn't know what was coming, but I also, I didn't want to know what might have been coming. And she was like, I kissed CJ. And I was like, like I couldn't even deal with it. I couldn't process it because he was my Levi, and I was like, I can't, you know, like it was rough for a little bit there in our apartment. Like, but she was like Levi was when he tells Cath about the girl he kissed in the kitchen. Cause she was like, you know, it was totally an accident. We both feel that way, and it shouldn't have happened. It was just like, we were in this situation and this is what happened, but we know it shouldn't have happened. And she was so like, I knew she felt really bad, but I was also like, even though he and I weren't dating at the time, we had that relationship, and we were still in that zone of like, we're on again, off again with that sometimes still, but he was my best friend, and it was just a whole lot of emotion. So I totally feel like Reagan on that side of it. Yeah. And like, yeah, you have to make those rules, you know, like
having those boundaries, right? Like that's super important. And see, and I'm kind of like on the opposite side of that a little bit. My husband and I, we started dating when I was still in high school, but he was a bit older than me. And we were hanging out, like we started hanging out together pretty much my entire high school career. Like I always knew him. We were always friends. And so I was friends with him and his girlfriend, like in grade 11 and 12. So like during his junior and senior year of school, I was friends with him and his girlfriend, and then they broke up, and my husband and I stayed really good friends. And eventually that kind of like developed into something more, but he also was friends with his ex. And so like, I get where Cath is like in this position, because she's friends with Reagan and she's friends with Levi. She knows that it's over, but it's still like, can't help that feeling of jealousy when they have the closeness that they do. Right. And I like that Cath identifies that before it becomes a problem, you know, like she kind of, when Reagan says you can't get jealous, Cath says, well, I'll try not to be jealous, but you have to understand also that it's hard on me because I like him and I like you. And so we, like my husband and I and his ex, did not handle that situation as gracefully as Cath and Reagan and Levi did. But yeah, it was a long time.
Oh man. Sticky situations for sure.
And like my husband is my Levi, and he still is, because he is like that level of kind of ditzy and clueless about like girl things. Like before we started dating, he told me that he was not interested in me at all. Like we'd been like talking to each other, and we'd been flirting and developing like this really intense closeness, and like there was chemistry and like all that good stuff there. And I was just like, well, I like you, so what are you going to do about it? And he said, I don't like you. I'm not in with you. And I was like so crushed. So then I like didn't talk to him for like 6 months. And when he, so when he finally came back, like he moved back to the same city that I was living in. And because we have friends in common, I am actually like best friends with his cousin. We ended up being like together again. And he essentially said, I freaked out because I liked you so much and I didn't know what to say.
Oh my gosh.
So like 6 months later, I had dated someone else in that window of 6 months. And he was like, I liked you so much, and I was so scared that I was going to mess it up because I was way over here and you were over there. It was long distance. Anyway, all of that to say, I totally get Cath and Levi and their situation.
Because that's what he does.
Yes, he's kind of clueless.
He's like, you weren't coming to the party. You said no. And so she was there and I kissed her and I was like, oh my gosh, you idiot. Like, and of course, then that's when she walks in. That's like in a movie. It's like in every teenage movie. Yeah. All those teenage movies, there's always a party. There's always a party. And the girl walks in and sees the guy who she likes, who she thought liked her. And he ends up kissing another girl at the party. It's just a thing. But I loved though, that he went to the hospital when her dad is in the hospital and he goes to see her. Even still knowing that it would be awkward and weird and not okay, you know, and they kind of, and then they have that conversation to hash it out. And but and that he's like
willing to do that, even though he knows he kind of blew his chance, maybe, right? Like that he's just, like you said, he's kind and he's funny and sweet and he's really realistic. I think that Levi is a pretty, like, he's not like a teenage heartthrob kind of character. Like he's studying agriculture. Like who wants to marry a farmer? Actually, in YA, when you walk into a YA book, are you like, yes, find me that, old MacDonald? No, nobody wants to marry a farmer.
No.
So it's like, it's so great that he's like totally a real guy. Like he's studying agriculture and he's got a receding hairline. Is that right?
Yes, which is hilarious. Because he's like, what, 21? Because he's older than her. He's a junior, I think, right? And yeah, it's funny. But I love that he wants her to read to him her fan fiction. I was like, oh, you have just sold me. You are mine now. Like that. And then she reads the whole of The Outsiders to him. Like, she reads the whole book to him. And then that's when they have their first kiss, which by the way was like the sweetest moment ever. And may or may not have reminded me of mine with one of my college boyfriends in a similar situation, but whatever. I mean, I didn't read him a whole book, but it's one of those situations where like they're on the bed together and that anyway, it's the whole thing. So I was like, yeah, I remember that. Anyway.
That like glowy, happy feeling when it's all new and exciting. And
I remember that. That was so
You're
sweet.
Nervous.
That was one of the best moments in the book though. But then, oh my gosh. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to just say, and like, I think it's cool that the reason that she has to read for him is because he has some sort of reading learning disability, dyslexia, maybe. I don't know if it comes out and says dyslexia, but like Levi struggles academically because he has a hard time reading and he needs this class to pass. And so like he drives her all the way to see her dad in the hospital and she does this beautiful thing. And I can't remember which one comes first, but like the whole story is them being super authentic and kind to each other and then falling in love with like the real person. And I like that. I like that it's like, it's not overly romanticized because it does happen. Like that's like a normal person's love story. And
that's
the
what
scene
we
you're
need.
Talking about. Exactly. Yes. The scene you're talking about, the one where is that where he says, read to me, sweetheart, when he's like getting her to read her fan fiction. And I'm like, that is like, oh my goodness. Like be still, my beating heart. That is my favorite line in all of literature, I think. I'm sorry, Jane Austen, you're going to have to step aside because like read to me, sweetheart is just such a perfect, beautiful invitation. It's intimate. It's like not skeevy. Like it's just so pure and I love it. So yeah, when they read to each other, I'm just like, oh, I'm toast. I'm so done. Like I'm on the ship full steam ahead.
I loved it. It was so perfect. And because she just like sits with him in his lap and reads him the book. And then, and she'll read him her fan fiction or Carry On. And he just loves it. And I'm like, there's not many guys who, especially in college, who would do that. So when you find that person, you need to hold on to that. But he still, it still was like really, because he was encouraging her too, to keep writing because he liked the story and he wanted to hear what she had written, and it was just great. And I want to kind of segue into the writing because I think we're probably going to be over an hour today, but it's fine. You guys just keep listening. Anyways, so, but like her writing. Okay. So thinking about her writing. Okay. The fan fiction. So now again, I have never really read any or whatever, been in this world, shockingly enough. But when her professor told her that she thought fan fiction was plagiarism, I was like, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. even not having been in that whole world, just based on reading this book, I was like, no, because it's okay. And then because when Victoria Aveyard posted that Instagram that I mentioned earlier, where she said that she had written fan fiction about whatever it was, the TV show, whatever it was she was watching, I was like, oh, see, even these published authors do it. So now she might have done that before she wrote Red Queen. Who knows? But still, so I'm like, no, I don't agree with that. All right. So I know you've got thoughts. So.
Oh, so many thoughts. So first off, for anyone who isn't a part of the fan fiction universe or who doesn't know what fan fiction is, as the name implies, it is when fans of a body of work, television show, video game, movie, books, like other book series, Harry Potter, like when people who love it so much create fan like fiction, fan work for it. And for some reason, because especially with written stuff, like, so if you take a book and then you create fan fiction based on the book or the characters in that book, we get really up in arms about plagiarism because I think because it's the like medium, right? Like writing, it's a like medium. So for some reason that kind of makes it a little bit more testy, but like fan fiction is about a lot of other things too. It's not just always writing about books. Like I've wrote fan fiction about a video game that I'm obsessed with. And so like it's not necessarily plagiarism because I'm not like copying words out of the book. Right. So then anyway, I digress. It's creating fan work based on something that's created by someone else, right? Like something that's been created by someone else. And it's not different than fan art. Like we have lots of fan art. People sell fan art, for heaven's sake. Fan fiction doesn't make money. It's just published online and it's like published free for people to read and enjoy because we've created community around fandom. It's a community. So lots of people, like the majority of people that I know, love fan fiction, have written fan fiction, read fan fiction. But there is still kind of some misunderstandings, I think, around what fan fiction is. And what I love about FanGirl is that it points out some of those misunderstandings and tries to unpack them in like, I think in a really, again, realistic way, a really intelligent way, because the professor is a literary writing professor. She writes, I can't remember, it's like American Gothic novels or something.
Yeah,
like she writes
weird. It was crazy.
like she writes very like classic contemporary literature sort of.
Yeah.
And fan fiction, because it's a new thing, it's newer. It's indicated that the professor maybe doesn't have the connection with fandom and understand what fandom is. And so then she judges what Cath has submitted, because Cath submits a piece of fan fiction, which kind of sets off this spark and generates a lot of plot. So then what I think the other piece of this that kind of is pointed out that I really love is how what the professor is trying to do is well-intentioned. She is trying to make Cath understand that Cath is her own writer, has her own voice, doesn't need to rely on other people's narratives or stories to be a writer. But is misunderstanding why Cath needs to write fan fiction. And so that's kind of where I'm like, people don't, when you don't write it or you don't read fan fiction, you don't understand what the purpose of it is. It's like, it's like created out of love and support and appreciation. And so I think for those reasons, most authors love fan fiction. Most authors think fan fiction is a wonderful thing because like, how can you not be just super
flattered,
moved, flattered, that people want to create stuff based on your work. Like if someone wrote fan fiction about my books, I would just be like, okay, I'm gonna pack up shop, like have a good day, everyone. I've hit all my life goals. So yeah, it's really cool that you get to see like kind of the critique on fan fiction, that it could be perceived as plagiarism, that it's maybe stunting like Cath's growth and development as a writer in her own voice, like using her own voice in her own stories. But then you also see all the really amazing parts of it, right? Like that it brings her peace. It's how she copes. It's where she's done most of her writing practice, right? Like the reason Cath is such a good writer is because she's practiced writing X amount of words in her Simon Snow fan fiction, right? And so like it's both sides of that. And I think because of the way Rainbow Rowell like identifies both sides of the argument and kind of processes it, you get to a point where Cath really like she figures it out for herself, you know, like she doesn't give up on fan fiction. She finishes her fan fiction. She hits her goal, but then the piece that she writes at the end of the book isn't fan fiction. And so she kind of does develop as a writer. And so, I'm obsessed with fan fiction as a concept. I think it's super, super awesome. And like, I write fan fiction, lots of writers, like famous writers, like you've said, like Victoria Koops, write fan fiction. People like, it's a huge community. And when people speak out against fan fiction, there's like always backlash because it's a misunderstanding of the reasons that it's being created. Like nobody is trying to make money on fan fiction. No one.
Right.
So anyway.
Not at all. Yeah. No, I agree. And I love seeing the ending of it too, when Cath writes her story, and it's really about her and Wren, you know, like it kind of comes back to how a lot of times people will say, write about what you know, like, and that, I mean, obviously there's lots of other ways to go with writing, like, you know, fantasy and dystopia and all these fun things. But it is, you know, but like, that's what Cath did, was she wrote about what she knew. She wrote this great story about her and Wren. That's what it seemed like it was going to be. Cause they don't give you the whole thing. And then she wins this was like the icing on the cake, I think, at the end, because she wins that prize, that contest, like that, to get her piece published that Nick wanted to publish the other piece for. So he couldn't publish it because she wouldn't sign off on it and agree to it. But then she gets to publish hers. She gets hers published. And it's kind of like the icing on the cake, like, that's what you get, Nick, you know, but also but just the validation for herself too. And, you know, the professor was probably like, I told you so, you know? But it's great because she finds her own voice in the end.
Yeah. And her own voice is still like intrinsically connected to her fan fiction. It's not like she just stops writing fan fiction forever. Like she's still, that's a big part of who she is and why she writes, you know? And so, like for me personally, I wrote fan fiction at a time when I was wanting to write, but couldn't dedicate myself to the practice of writing enough to generate my own like world building, my own story building. And so I wrote fan fiction because some of that was already pre-generated for me, and it helped me develop my writing practice. So I used it like as a writing exercise where I would challenge myself to write every single day in my fan fiction. And then once that became kind of a muscle memory thing, once I got into the practice of that, I had a story to tell and I knew I wanted to tell it. And so I had the skills now developed to write every day and do that with like more consistency. So it actually grew me as a writer early on in my writing career. So I'm like, I don't understand why people are so hard on fan fiction. I think it's like, they just misunderstand the purpose and the reason that people write fan fiction.
Yeah. I mean, that would be my guess too, is because again, I've not, this is really my first like big exposure to it. So, but I would imagine that's what it is people are just misunderstanding it, you know, which is sad. Yeah. Cause it's,
or
it's
just
really
like
cool
kind
thing.
of a purist, like very, like if you're totally a purist or like you're very elitist, I think if you're kind of a pompous jerk, then maybe you look down your nose at fan fiction. But if you're that kind of person, I don't really want to know you. So
True. I think it depends, you know. Okay, because see, if I could totally see it. Like if you're a purist about something, you know, like there are some things that you love so much. Like, okay, for me, I am obsessed, and people know this from listening to my podcast because I've mentioned it multiple times. Also, bonus for my Patreon will be on this as well, is The Princess Bride. I am obsessed with The Princess Bride. Like it's just perfection to me. And so if there are other things done about it, like if it's not, I mean, I will go off on it. You know, like to me, I am an absolute purist when it comes to The Princess Bride. It has to be this way, and nobody ever better dare touch it. You know, like towards the beginning of the pandemic last year, there was like a group of celebrities who did like a at-home version of The Princess Bride where they all like, and it was to raise money. So I only saw like bits and pieces of it. And it was on some like weird platform I had never heard of before, but they did it to raise money for a good cause. But it was like all these random celebrities got together and played different parts of The Princess Bride. And I was like, yeah. And I saw bits and pieces of it and I was like, no. If somebody's going to do this and it's to raise money, it has to be the actual cast, which they then did, by the way, which I, of course, was like, yeah, I'm totally going to pay and watch this. But anyways, but I was like, I will give you some money to watch the original cast, do a read through of the whole thing. I'm going to sit on Zoom for 2 hours. Of course I am. Anyways, but so like I can kind of see if you have something where you're like super crazy passionate about, sometimes you just don't want anybody to touch it. You don't want it to be different, you know, like, but there is also a point where you have to kind of give a little bit. Sometimes I think like there's a comedian who does the best videos ever, her and another comedian, actress. But they do these like according to kids videos is what they're called. So they'll have the kids tell the story of like, she's done The Little Mermaid, Cinderella, whatever. So, and then you see the actors act it out, but they're lip syncing to the kid. So you hear the kid, the adult, but you hear the kid's voice.
Right.
And she did a Princess Bride one. It's the best thing I've ever seen. Like it's hilarious. And my boys and I will watch it over and over and over because it is so funny. So, you know, and it's little kids and she had fun. They made fun of it. They had fun with it. So it was like, and they did like justice to it still. So I'm like, all right, that's good. That's fun. But I'm like a purist when it comes to other parts of it. So I can kind of see that, but you know, I think it just depends.
And you know what? Then I think that like part of my kind of like response to that is that sure, be a purist about the things that you love the most, and that's totally okay. But like if there are people creating fan fiction about it, you don't need to read it, right? Right. So it blows up occasionally. Occasionally fan fiction will blow up on like Twitter because someone will be like, fan fiction is the devil and like it's plagiarism, and it starts a whole like I don't know, like 6 months ago, this happened on Twitter, and it starts a whole thing. Like we have the conversation all over again. And it's like, okay, if you don't like reading fan fiction about your beloved thing, don't read it. Like, right. Then just don't read it. There's lots of, and if there's like, if you're into Marvel superheroes, but like, you don't care that much if people change their stories because they always change anyway in the comic books, like who cares? Right. Then read Marvel fan fiction instead, right? Like it's like it's not all terrible just because it changed the one thing that you're in love with. And and like the people who changed it are likely that much in love with it too. They're just expressing it differently.
I feel like we can use the Batman movies as an example here because I love Batman. I love Batman. However, there comes a point when A, you've made entirely too many Batman movies, but whatever.
Oh,
B,
man.
so the quality just kind of goes downhill. You know what I mean? Like, so I feel like there's
Mhm.
like there's certain Batman movies I watch, and then these other ones I just won't watch them because I know like it's not going to happen. Like Michael Keaton, all day, every day, my original, and I love him. I
See,
only
and
watched
I,
I only watch Val Kilmer because, well, he's nice to look at, but then I skip
fair.
then I skip a bunch. And then I go Christian Bale, and I'm really good there. I live in Christian Bale Batman era, and that's great. But that's it. I don't do George Clooney Batman, and I don't do Ben Affleck Batman because I just no. See, like I have my opinions, but I'll do some Batman and just choose not to take part in the ones I don't like. So,
Yeah.
pick.
Yep. Yeah. And it's not hurting anyone else. Like fan fiction isn't
Right.
taking money from writers. That's not happening.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
So
Whereas
I
bad
don't know.
Batman movies take money from people, but whatever.
True. You know what? I'm a huge DC fan too, actually. Like I love DC comics way more. I love the Justice League way more than I love the Avengers.
Mhm.
And like DC, what are you doing?
Yeah, the movies
Like-
are not as good though.
Like, why are you so bad at movies? Like, I don't
Seriously.
understand.
I don't either.
Don't understand. None of the DC movies, like Justice League, like I
Mm-mm.
liked the
Gosh, it's
original Wonder
horrible.
Woman.
Me
The
too.
original
The
Wonder
first
Woman,
one.
and that's it.
I haven't actually seen the second one yet, but I heard a lot of people say that they didn't like it as much and it wasn't as good. And I'm like, yeah, like I don't like again. So we know I have opinions on Batman, right? Some of those are okay. I mean, some of them are horrible. And then there's like Aquaman and the Justice League, and Wonder Woman was good, but then I'm like, I can't like I don't even know how I made it through Justice League. Like I came out of that movie and I was like, shoot me.
I haven't watched it because I like
don't.
the Teen Titans are my favorite superhero team. I also really like
my
X-Men, but like
Yes.
Justice League is like it is where like that is what I watched with my dad growing up. Like the whole DC animated universe. I'm like, can't you just do what you do in the animated movies,
Right? And make it
but
in
like
live
for
action.
an actual movie? Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah. Why
get
can't
the
you
same
transfer
people.
that?
Your
just
live
don't
action
get
movies stink.
Yeah, I just don't get it. Cause like I watched the Marvel movies and I'm always like every Marvel movie, I'm like, this is the best movie I've ever seen. I love these. And then I see the DC movies and I'm like, what the heck happened? And even, okay, this even happens with the TV show versions because the Disney Plus is doing all those Marvel TV shows, which are good. And then there's like the DC TV shows that are on, I think it's the CW that I've seen, like Green Arrow and The Flash, which now I did what we both did. We watched for a while, but then after like a couple seasons, my husband and I were like, this sucks now. It's really going downhill. They are really going in a bad direction. And we stopped watching. Like we didn't even finish all the seasons because and I'm like, I don't understand. Why?
Yeah.
Why? What is happening here? Although I do like X-Men. I haven't seen the new ones, but
and
I
this
like
is
the
where,
original ones.
like the writer and creative person in me is like, I recognize that there are creative, good people who are trying to do something in all of these. Like there are writers and there are actors, there are employees who are really trying their hardest to like produce good content. But I'm just like, why is it so not working for you? Like when Marvel is like kicking superhero movies out of the park and you're leaving us with Justice League and like a really dark Superman versus Batman that didn't make sense. And like, so I'm just like,
I didn't even, so you want to hear something funny? I didn't even watch Batman versus Superman, but then we went to see Justice League and I was like, you watched it, right? Before I say that. So we go to watch Justice League and I was like, why is Superman dead? What happened? And then I was like, oh, okay, I guess somehow Batman killed Superman in the movie before this, which totally doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
There's no
No.
way that would ever happen in any real Batman Superman world. That could never happen, at least for my world. I mean, anyways, whatever. But then I will say this though. While the movies stink, DC hires some pretty people. I will say that, like,
Yeah,
was
Henry
actually.
Cavill
Oh gosh, that's why I agreed to go see the Justice League movie with my husband, because I was like, and then I was like, wait, he's dead, but I don't even get to watch Henry Cavill for most of this movie. What the heck? I was really mad.
Yeah,
I will sit and watch Batman all day long. I mean,
Jason Momoa, I'm like, okay, like I just
Yeah.
hire the pretty ones and get us to come.
and
Sure.
that's what they've done. I mean, Gal Gadot is gorgeous. She's the most beautiful
Yes.
Wonder Woman.
Oh.
I mean, now Linda Carter was gorgeous too, but I'm like, well, I mean, there's like no, I mean, you Gal Gadot, like she's, I
Yeah.
mean, psh. So they
I
just
love
they
her.
hire pretty people.
Yeah.
At least there's that.
Anyway, so this is
So
our
anyways,
like
we've turned this-
critique.
We have turned this episode about FanGirl and fan fiction into let's critique fan fiction of DC and Marvel movies. Anyways, moving on. Thank you to those of you who are still here listening and did not fast forward through that section. Much appreciated. All right, moving on. So any final thoughts about FanGirl?
I think it is an excellent book. I love it so much. I love it so much that I have 2 copies of it. I have a copy that
Aw.
I have read, and I have a copy that I've actually written in. I know that's kind of blasphemous, but when I said that I used it as like a study book for becoming a better writer, like I actually wrote in it, I highlighted things, I did all the things you're not supposed to do to your precious books, but I also bought a second copy so that I could have like a nice one and then a messy one.
So that's okay then.
So-
It's fine. It's forgivable. It's not a big deal. Yeah.
So it's just such an excellent story. And like you said, it's very easy to read. It's very straightforward. And I would 110% recommend it to anyone who is like looking at maybe reading something YA, but isn't sure if they want to get into YA, or just anyone who loves YA. Like this would be the book that I recommend first.
Yeah, it's a great place to start. Definitely. It's really good. And it's just really relatable and realistic in so many ways, whereas so many other books are not. And I'm not talking about the ones that are meant to be that way, like fantasy and whatnot. That's not what I'm talking about. Like other contemporary books are sometimes it's not what I want it to be, like it's frilly. They can sometimes be frilly and like movie-esque, like this is what happens and it's so perfect and pretty. And then this happens and, but this one is real. It's real. And again, like, all the serious stuff we talked about at the beginning. And then also just like with how it totally pulled me back into my college days. Like, I mean, it was just so perfect in that way. And I loved it. And all of her references that me as a 40-year-old woman would get and appreciate. There was another one too, but I missed it anyway. So yeah, I love it too. Also highly recommend it. So there you are. Okay. Well, thank you. This was so much fun, Victoria. I'm so glad that you recommended this book to me and that you got to be here with me today. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll have to do this again soon. We'll have to find another book.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much to all of you for listening. And I know this episode went a little bit longer than usual, but hey, that's all right. That's because Victoria and I always just have so much fun chatting. We just can't help ourselves. And it's fun. I love it. It's okay. But thank you all for listening. And thank you to my patrons. You know who you are. And I love you and appreciate you so much for continuing to support the podcast. So I'm saying thank you to you, Victoria, as well. And that, yay. Victoria is one of my awesome patrons. Love it. By the way, shameless plug here. If you become a patron, you also, well, at the $5 level, you will get the chance to become a guest yourself on YA Book Chat. So there you go. Take a look and see what you think. All right. Enough of that plugging. Let's go. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And we will chat again soon. Today's episode featured the book FanGirl by Rainbow Rowell. Be sure to follow YA Book Chat on Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you can get your episodes as soon as they are available. And have you checked out the YA Book Chat Patreon yet? You should. There are lots of great benefits that await. YA Book Chat was created, is hosted, and edited by me, Leah Stuhler.